Welcome to the Mom in Mind podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. On the episode today, I'm talking with Dr. Olivia Waddell, and she is going to be talking with us about the experience and the grief that comes with mothering without a mother. She does talk about her personal experience a little bit, and we focus on a lot of the grief that comes up for people, sometimes, oftentimes, actually, unexpected grief and grief in unexpected ways. The grief process is a very messy one, but for people who have lost their mothers earlier on in life and are going into the motherhood experience for themselves, sometimes you just don't know what's going to come up when you have your own child, and some unexpected grief can come up. We also talk about grief that comes up in multiple ways, whether you had a good relationship with your mother or a not good relationship, and other types of grief like disenfranchised grief, which she'll talk about a little bit more. This is such an important conversation, and I know one that everybody can resonate with because we've all at least experienced disenfranchised grief. But for those of you in particular who've experienced the loss of a mother, whether it was a good relationship or not, I know that this will resonate for you as well. Dr. Olivia is a temporarily tired but permanently happy mom of a happy, creative, and wildly curious boy who is 4. And professionally, she is a licensed professional counselor in Texas. In addition to being a national certified counselor, she is certified also in perinatal mental health by Postpartum Support International. In addition to postpartum and maternal mental health counseling, she offers non clinical support services for prenatal and postpartum planning for families, psychoeducation and support for parents with children's ages 1 through 3, and community and provider education on perinatal mental health. She is a trained facilitator for Circle of Security Parenting Intervention Program and is also a certified provider for mother loss grief training. So let's dive in and meet Dr. Olivia. Welcome, Olivia. Thank you for being here.
It's great to be here. I'm excited about our conversation.
Me too. And I'm really happy that you're bringing a wide perspective on grief and motherhood, because, people associate so closely grief with just death. But there
Yes.
are so many other types of grieving that people experience. It's such a needed conversation because,
Mhm.
people often don't know why they're feeling what they're feeling,
Yes.
and you are going to help them understand that
Mhm.
today. So
Yes.
yeah, please do start wherever you'd like with your entry into this work.
Yes, absolutely. I will share a little bit about my personal experience because it's due to that and what I went through that I learned that grief is multifaceted, and that it doesn't present just in instances of loss. It can present in multiple ways. So, I was fortunate to become a mother, what I would consider a little bit later in life, and I lost my mom in my 20s. So one of the things that just completely blindsided me, literally laying there just moments after delivering my son, was this overwhelming, and I can't even think of a word to really describe the feeling. It was just really overwhelming. Like I desperately wanted my mother in that moment.
Yeah,
And I was blindsided.
right.
I was like, I'm feeling this tremendous joy, just so much love, and my birth was one of those experiences where I did feel immediate love and bonding, with my son as soon as I held him. So I was very much blindsided whenever I just felt these waves of grief come over me, and I was like, "Well, this was this was unexpected." So I honestly, and when you're in the throes with a newborn, you don't really have time to think and process a lot outside of what needs to be done
Right,
immediately.
right.
Um, so it was several months in, whenever I was going to counseling myself, that I realized that actually what I was angry about and some of the things that were affecting me, it was grief.
Mm.
And it was really re-grieving the loss of my mother, the things that I knew would be helpful if I had her, if she was here, if she was present to help out. So it was not only grieving the fact that she is not here, but grieving all of the things that I was experiencing daily that I knew she was missing out on.
Mm.
So that led me to fast forward another year or so, and I obtained my PMHC. to specialize in perinatal mental health, just because I wanted other birth givers to not be so caught off guard by
Mhm.
grief.
Yeah.
So that is how it began, with just a little part of my own story, because it was from there that I learned there are so many other things that we will grieve along the way.
For sure. Just in the transition into
Yes,
parenthood.
yes, yes.
Um, yeah. And so, I mean, that I've had a couple of well, a handful of clients who've experienced something similar to what you're
Mhm.
describing. And just like you said, all of their experiences, like they thought they, had kind of like quote unquote dealt with it or were at a certain place with
Yes.
it. But this is one of
Mhm.
those things you don't necessarily anticipate being
Yes.
hit with this.
Right.
And um what's the word, not destabilizing but maybe even disorienting, or it
Mhm.
can kind of uh, put you off a bit,
Yes. Yes.
and like trying to orient yourself into your own motherhood or parenthood experience.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
that what you see a lot?
I do see that a lot, and I think disorientation or disoriented is a great way to describe it, because I know when I became a mom, and I see it in so many instances with clients, it's very hard to reconcile that you can love your baby and be so glad to be a parent, but
Hmm.
also really grieve other components of the experience. And I think that's what sort of, I don't wanna say tripped me up, but that's the phrase that comes to mind. It was like, how do I feel both things?
Oh, right.
And the result is being very disoriented.
Yeah. They seem like they would be opposite feelings
Yes.
in a way.
Mhm.
Um, and I mean, I think when you were saying that, it made me remember just how much pressure there is, anyways, on how
Yes.
you're supposed to feel a certain way during this
Mhm.
time, and which
Yes.
totally takes out this other complexity
Mhm.
all
It
along the
does.
way.
It does. 'Cause I just remember that, and, I've had clients say the same thing when there are constant messages that you're supposed to enjoy every moment,
Hmm.
and there's some moments that you're simply not enjoying for various reasons. Um, you start to I think we can internalize that, and then we start to second guess ourselves, and it can just lead to a spiral of other difficult thoughts and feelings.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, I would love to talk more about this, the what you see and what the grief looks like and feels like
Mhm.
for people who are starting their well, in this case, what we're talking about, their motherhood journey without their own
Yes.
mother. What are
Mhm.
some of the things that you see that people experience, especially things that like people wouldn't necessarily tag as, oh, this is grief?
Yes, yes. I really believe that there are when we see presentation of postpartum anger or postpartum rage, that if we start peeling back some of those layers, that it's almost always something related to grief.
Mm-hmm.
I've had multiple situations over the last 3 years or so where we would be working with that presentation, just postpartum rage, for example,
Yeah.
and we would start looking through, like, family history and meaningful relationships. I would say in more than half of the cases, there was a maternal loss when the relationship was healthy. And then there's a separate complication with that grief when there's mother loss, and the relationship was not healthy, when it
Yep.
was toxic. Um,
Yeah.
so again, multifaceted.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That
Mhm.
that is interesting too, from the sense of like even for, you made me think of a couple of folks that I've been working with where their mothers are alive, but the relationship
Yes.
is not there,
Mhm.
or
Yes.
the mom is not a supportive person,
Mhm.
um, and how much loss that feels like
Yes. Yes.
too.
Mhm.
Um, right. So essentially, not having your mother there,
Yes.
or a mother that you feel supported by,
Mhm.
are both types of loss.
Yes. Yes. Both
Oof.
types of loss. Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, I'm really interested in the rage component that you were describing. I assume
Yes.
that can relate to a lot of different types of loss, a lot of different
Yes.
types of grief. But like, what have you seen for people when you've been able to help them identify that their rage is connected to a type of loss?
Yes, that's a great question. And really, I still remember the first time I was in a session and we made that connection that, yes, I'm angry, but I'm grieving. We were looking at a feelings wheel, and anger was listed as one of the big emotions, and then some of the smaller emotions that were under anger, grief was one of them. And so the light bulb, it was like a light bulb came on for me because I was like, is there any chance at what you're feeling with all of this, frustration and anger, that there's some grief mixed in as well? And she's like, well, yeah. She said, I think so. She said, but nobody would believe me. She said, I've tried to talk about it. People think
Oh,
I'm being silly. So again,
wow.
started digging, and that's where some of the information around disenfranchised grief came up. That was an instance where it was a situation where her mother was is alive, but was not a safe person, was not a supportive person. And so she was feeling like with her transition in becoming a mother, that she was dealing with everything that came back up from her childhood and her
Mhm.
teenage years, and feelings of abandonment, and those worries translated into, "Well, what if I do this to what if I do this to my child?"
Oh my gosh, right.
So I still remember it was like really like a light bulb just came on when both of us realized it's like, yes, you're angry, but what's really going on here is you're grieving.
That's really
Mhm.
powerful.
Yes.
Um, that's really powerful because that rage and anger feels horrible.
Yes, it does.
It feels horrible,
Mhm.
and it's. I think a lot of people feel, confused by it, or scared by it
Yes.
even sometimes.
Yes.
Like, why am
Mhm.
I feeling this?
Yes.
So wow. I mean, for people who are listening or maybe experiencing
Mhm.
rage themselves, this would be a great exploration point
Yes.
to look into grief as part of that reason. And I want to highlight and have you talk a little bit more about what you said, the disenfranchised grief. Can you
Yes.
talk about
Yes.
what that is? And yeah.
Yes, and I've seen it relate to anger and what we would classify as postpartum rage, just like mother loss. Obviously, different feelings associated with it, but things around like going back to work, feeling very sad, grieving about going back to work due to thoughts around this. I'm going to be missing out on time with my baby,
Hmm.
all of the shoulds, those,
Hmm.
societal constructed messages like I should not put my kiddo in childcare. On the flip side, I've also seen situations where moms are very excited about going back to work, and that's okay too. But then feeling guilty and feeling upset and feeling sad about, am I a bad mom because I'm excited to go back to work?
Right.
And then just some other examples of disenfranchised grief that I've seen in my practice, things like the relationship changes. If you're in a committed relationship, that can be really hard s- to deal with and really hard to see the changes in the relationship that happen as a result of becoming parents. And I would say also when you add kiddos to, all the relationship dynamics change. So I've seen that. And then grieving the life that you had before. I see that one a lot in my practice, trying to reconcile, yes, I love being a mom. And in some cases, I love my kiddos, but I don't necessarily love being a mom.
Hmm.
And just the sadness and the way it's described, it really is a grief experience. Like, this is not what I thought it was going to be, and I'm sad about it, but I don't feel like there's a lot of space for me to say that out loud.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I mean that is another one of those areas where people people's experience gets minimized. Like, oh, well, you
Mhm.
have a happy, healthy kid or
Yes.
whatever
Yes.
it is.
Yes.
And maybe it's not the intention to minimize somebody's feelings, but
Yes.
that's often the impact.
Mhm.
And gosh, that makes it hard for people to open up.
Yes, it does. The dismissive messages I've seen are just really rampant in so many
Yeah.
circles, in so many settings. The dismissive messages that accompany things that we grieve that maybe society doesn't recognize as grief related. Does a lot of harm. It does a
Yeah,
lot of harm.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Um, and I think to that point, impacts a lot of relationships.
Yes, it
Like
does.
if you don't feel like you can talk to somebody about it, you don't feel
Hmm.
as close to the people you're
Yes.
trying to connect with.
Hmm.
We tend to like pull back,
Yes.
uh, not want to share anymore,
Hmm.
and then your grief also feels very lonely.
Yes. Lonely and isolating, but I think it's really important with conversations around grief, whether disenfranchised or related to loss. There has to be a context of emotional safety to be
Hmm.
able to process and share those thoughts and feelings. And
That's
when
right.
it changes the nature of the relationship, then emotional safety can it goes out the window.
Oh, right. Oh, for
Hmm.
sure. And I don't think that's necessarily the intent always of the
Right,
person
right.
who's, being
Hmm.
dismissing your feelings.
Yes,
Sometimes they themselves can't tolerate
exactly.
the feelings that you're
Oh,
having,
yes.
like if I go to somebody and I'm sort of feel like I'm pouring over with this grief feeling and they don't know what to
Yes,
do with it, they might just
right.
trying to put band-aids on it like, oh, but you're
Mhm,
fine, blah blah
mhm,
blah. Because we don't, I think as a society, at least in Western culture,
mhm,
um, don't have really good ways to deal with
right.
grief,
Yes, yes,
um, in a community sort of way
yes.
or individually, now that I think about
Right, really in any way in Western society. I mean, I think some of the healthier organizations that I've seen will give, a week of bereavement, and that's when it's related to an actual loss, to death. But when you're in the position of grieving a loss that maybe happened several years ago, and you're, trying to figure out parenting and all of the things, it's almost like there is no acceptable standard for time. So,
right.
so hard.
It is so hard. And yeah, you do bring up a really great point, just about the systems that are set up.
Mhm. Oh, yes.
The week is generous in terms of
It
what I've
is
seen
generous.
in
Mhm.
kind of corporate systems or
Yes.
whatnot. It's often 3 days, but
Yes, 3
that's if
days.
there's been an actual
Yes.
loss or death.
Mhm.
I think some states are trying to change that as it relates to perinatal loss,
I think so.
um,
Yes.
which is great. But still, I mean, if you look
Mhm.
in the DSM for like how long the grief process takes, it's like
Yes.
6 months.
I know, I know. Yes. Yes.
Not that you're not functional at all
Right.
during that time, but
Mm.
for any kind of fog to lift, with grief, it takes some time because you're having to
Yes.
like rearrange your whole self.
Everything. Yes, everything. Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can you um, share a little bit more about what you see, other ways that you see grief showing
Yes.
up for, I guess, anyone in the perinatal
Mhm.
pregnancy, postpartum?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I work a lot with, perinatal anxiety and depression in my practice. And what I see so many times, and I wish that I had researched if this was area specific or um, more broad, what I see so many times is moms who have internalized a lot of shame around the fact that they're struggling with their mental health in the postpartum time frame. Um, Sometimes it stems from things that family members have mentioned or friends have mentioned, but I've seen it too where, it's just they'll be, what I call the doom scrolling on social media, and they'll see something, if you'd had a particular type of birth, then you wouldn't struggle with your mental health, or if you had done this, then you wouldn't struggle with your mental health, just so many things, and we know with birth, even the best of plans, there are still many things that are beyond our control
Right.
with having a baby, and so I see a lot of anxiety and depression resulting from maybe things not going as they planned or hoped with their birth, but then they start to struggle and experience grief with the fact that what they had hoped for in terms of how their mental health affected them post-birth
Mm-hmm.
is not what they hoped for, and so then they that leads to internalizing and, difficult emotions and ruminating thoughts. If I had done this, I wouldn't be dealing with this now, or if I had tried to enjoy every moment when he was younger, then I wouldn't be feeling this way now. It's like that's not necessarily the case. Um, you know.
Right. Uh, right. But how? It's
Yeah.
a tough question because how do
Yes,
you know?
yes. Right, how do we know? Yes, how do we know? And, one of the things that I really like in when we go there in those conversations is it's an intervention through acceptance and commitment therapy, is start having conversations about their values, like, in these moments, regardless of how old your kiddo is, um, what are the things that you really value about this experience and with what you hope for? And so then we go back and we look through those scenarios and situations that we've discussed from their past, whether from birth forward, and just identify times when they did see themselves parenting according to their values. And that doesn't mean that every those days were ideal or those days were perfect. It just means they can see instances of when they were parenting according to their values, and then that almost always changes the nature of the conversation in a good way. Um, it validates what they were feeling and experiencing, but also shows evidence of, hey, you are parenting in a way that's true to the values that you possess.
Oh,
Mhm.
wow. That I imagine brings well helps like close the gap on that feeling
Yes,
of loss
yes.
to
Mhm,
for
mhm.
I mean, I guess loss sometimes feels out of control.
It does. Yes. Mm,
It's really hard to find the ground, so to
it
speak, like
is.
how you were describing
Mhm.
helping somebody through that. It's
Yeah.
hard to see that you're that you are doing something that you want to do when it
Yes,
feels
yes,
so bad, like the
yes,
disconnect between what something feels like and what's actually happening
yes,
um,
yes.
is quite
Mhm.
hard. So like somebody
Yes.
who's grieving
Mhm.
um, might feel lost in their
Yes.
feelings,
Mhm.
emotionally, but their behavior might be that
Yes.
they're doing what they want to do.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost always what I hear. They're able to talk about moments of intention or moments of joy, even though it's a day that might have just been excruciatingly difficult. Like they did get in the floor and play with their kiddo, or they chose to hold their little one for a contact nap because it was just, peaceful and, precious, precious space in that moment. So I think and that's something I try to do in my practice is just help identify some of those moments of joy, or maybe when things aren't quite as severe in the hard moments. Like we can experience joy in the middle of a hard moment. And again, it's trying to reconcile our beautiful brains to that fact. You can feel both. You
Mm-hmm.
can experience both. Mhm.
Sure. I imagine that applies to not just the disenfranchised grief that
Mhm.
you're talking about, but um, going back to the loss of your own
Yes.
mother or mother
Yes.
figure, even. Uh, people. But you said already, like that there's a distinction between people who had a good relationship,
Mhm.
supported relationship with their
Yes.
parent, and not a good one that
Yes.
wasn't supportive. Um, so maybe we can talk about them in kind of
Mhm.
two separate, overly simplified tracks.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
if you are feeling like you're I'm thinking of somebody who had a good and supportive relationship
Mhm.
with their own mother, um, and if they're maybe feeling lost, in the like my mom was supposed to help me with this stuff.
Yes.
Um and she's not here and I don't know what to do.
Mhm.
How do people cope with that and manage that that feeling of feeling lost in their own
Mhm.
motherhood journey?
Right. It sounds almost too simple to be true, but I've initiated conversations around, well, if she were here,
Hmm.
what would you do?
Hmm.
And since she's not here, and the conversation builds on that, of those things, what are you going to do anyway? So if she were
Hmm.
here, the things that you know you would do, are you already doing some of those same things
Hmm.
even though she's not here? And again, I wish I had data on it. Maybe I need to apply for funding and try to do a study. But I can't think of any time where a parent was unable to identify that they weren't doing some of the things anyway that they would do if their mom was here. And then that instills like some hope, and it's like they can catch their breath
Mm.
a little deeper. It's like, okay, she's not here, but I am still doing a lot of the things that I would do even if she were
Mhm.
here.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right, that is important to
Mhm.
kind of make that concrete.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
have for people to have something to hold on to.
Yes. Yes. I've found that very beneficial to really build on the presence of something instead of focusing on the absence of something or trying to, squash difficult emotions or some things like that. Building on the presence of
Mhm.
something that they've identified, it makes it even more powerful. It's not something I've pointed out necessarily, it's something
Right,
they've identified, and then we build
right.
on that. Mhm.
I think that is really good because I mean, it's great because it can also facilitate like still feeling connected.
Yes. Yes.
Even with some if somebody's not there
Mhm.
physically there,
Yes. Yes.
that there is some part of their own mother or experience
Mhm.
of their childhood with their mother that they're
Yes.
bringing in with their own kiddos.
Absolutely. Yes.
Well, that
Mhm.
can feel. I mean, that feels really potentially quite powerful.
Yes. Like I said, I've seen it, just really create a I would say, renewed perspective that's more hopeful.
Hmm.
Um, Almost like they can take some meaning from that experience, and I think when we're suffering or having a really hard time, if we can, you know, find some meaning, it can almost make it feel like that our suffering has a purpose. And I've seen that time and time again in having those conversations about the presence of things. And it might be something really small and minor all the way up to, you know, things that are major to
Hmm.
them. That's the beauty of it too. It's very subjective. Like it works
Oh, right.
for the very individual. It's not a cookie cutter thing. It's very individualized.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That's a um, great, powerful way to keep somebody connected to
Hmm.
themselves and
Yes.
their mother.
Yes.
It's just still so hard.
It is.
It
It
is.
is.
It's like you were saying at the top, that kind of like mix of
Hmm.
grief and being present and being
Yes.
connected in
Yes.
current time to
Hmm.
your kiddo.
Yes.
And then kind of going down that other track that I mentioned, when there is a loss of a when there's not a mother around, but you had
Hmm.
a really difficult relationship with them,
Yes.
or the mother's still alive, but they're not a source of comfort or
Hmm.
support or anything like that. Going into your own motherhood experience can be quite
Yes.
complex.
Yes. Very complex.
And what are some ways that you are able to support people in those scenarios?
Yes. Really along a lot of the I would say mostly along the same lines in terms of building on the presence of something, but not in the way that I would have the conversation with somebody who had a very stable and supportive mother figure. It's what it looks like. What are you doing differently, or what do you hope to do differently
Mm-hmm.
in order to meet your kiddos' needs in ways that you verbalize your needs aren't met? So again, that speaks to the presence of something, not from their experience, because those narratives are usually, like I said, they're complex, they're filled with pain, they're stressful, they
Right.
bring up, really stressful emotions, painful emotions.
Mhm.
So looking at it from the sense of how are you parenting your child already, that tells you you're doing something different.
Mhm.
I've had multiple clients say, like, the trauma stops here, like, it's not carrying on to my children, like, I'm gonna do the work and I'm gonna stop it here. So, again, it really goes back to a values-based conversation, or even having a conversation about what are you doing differently. And then as we progress in the counseling relationship, really using those things that they say initially as a baseline. So, what else are you doing? When, maybe your partner noticed that you did something, what does that tell you? And then what do you need to continue doing that
Mhm.
would ensure you're doing something different with your own kiddo?
Yeah, I think that is also really powerful. It's made me think of a couple of examples of people I'm currently supporting who have that challenging relationship.
Hmm.
And sometimes that anxiety is really high of like,
Yes.
I can't do anything like my
Hmm.
mom did to me. And
Yes.
so sometimes it can almost feel like the pendulum swings where
Yes.
somebody, let's say, might become, if they had some or abandonment from a mother, they become like very overly involved in every
Hmm.
aspect, and that is
Yes.
so anxiety producing.
Yes, it
And
is.
they're not able to see what they're already doing that is different from
Yes.
what their parent did.
Mhm.
So it's like that, like, rounding to the present is,
Yes,
it's useful across the board,
it is. I think
um,
so.
for everybody. Because, right, you have your own relationship to whoever
Mhm.
it is that you're relating to, but
Yes.
also the past and the future and what
Yes.
you want that to
Yes.
look like. And
Mhm.
um, so it can be really hard in the midst of all of that
Oh, yes.
emotional upheaval. Really,
Mhm.
really hard to see that you're
Yes.
doing a good job already, or
Yes.
doing a job
Yes.
that you want to do, however you
That you
define it.
want to do. Yes, absolutely. That's so true. Yes to all of the above. And that's when, in those moments too, I'm really glad that they've sought out therapy. For support, for education, for validation, for all of those things. Because my mind, I don't know if it's my a mom brain thing or a counselor brain thing, but my mind goes to the ones that are struggling, and maybe they haven't reached out for a variety of reasons. We know there's a variety of reasons. Um, so I'm really glad for the ones that do reach out, and we
Mhm.
can create that space. And then for the ones that don't reach out, I've seen, things like community education, podcasts, workshops, different things like that being useful tools, so that they still have information and support even if they're not in a therapeutic relationship.
For sure. Yeah, can you say more about the educational piece and the
Yes.
support, and how, like, what kinds of things you've seen that are helpful and how it helps people?
Yes. It's been a couple of years ago now, but I had a couple of midwives in the area where I live reach out and just ask for some resources for education, to give to clients that they had seen, or that doulas were working with, that for various reasons were not ready to come to counseling. And so they wanted to have some resources to share. And so that really started my wheels turning in terms of what are some things that we can make available so that they can know they're not alone maybe in what they're thinking and experiencing, even though they're not in a counseling relationship. So I had actually been contacted by an organization in Virginia, which is my home state. I live in Texas. I wound up doing some virtual community education and wellness for that organization, just in really for their employees to know.
Mhm.
It's a family services organization. When we hear parents say certain things, or when we have parents ask for certain resources, like how do we have these conversations, because we don't know how to help. And then in the area where I live, there was interest in community education for, I say, really anybody that loves someone that's had a baby. you should have some type of education and resources to assist. So, I'll be honest, this podcast is one that I have found extremely useful in sharing so many important messages around the mental health and just navigating all of the changes and the things that we go through and grow through,
Mhm. Yeah.
and how everything in life is changed and is affected when we become parents. So I we put our heads together, me and a couple other professionals. We put our heads together and created a list of resources of different books, podcasts, um, TED talks, things like that, just so that we could midwives and doulas in this instance could have a list of
Yeah.
resources to hand off to their families, and then hosting some conversations in the community where it was just really open space where people could come and engage in conversations around postpartum mental health.
Mhm. Right. I mean, creating the space is so
Yes.
important.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
it's uh, it's beautiful because I mean you don't know what people are going to come in with,
Yes.
but when you are like you said, creating the space, it makes it possible for people
Hmm.
who don't have avenues to get the support
Yes.
to come and get the support or
Hmm.
even hear how other people are dealing with similar
Yes.
things
Hmm.
because it can feel so lonely
Yes.
um, and so isolating.
Yes.
I think too what is really hard about, well, a lot of things is that
Hmm.
sometimes people will worry that they'll go into a group setting and they'll be more overwhelmed
Yes.
by what they're hearing. But when you go into like a facilitated group with
Hmm.
somebody who already knows that that might happen,
Yes. Yes.
it's like it's kind of addressed in
Yes.
a way to continue to make that space
Yes.
safe,
Yes.
as safe
Yes.
as possible as it can be for you, given
Right.
um,
Right.
whatever's going on.
Yes.
So what do you see from when people get the education, information, and I guess maybe even the support people, the
Mhm.
doulas and midwives that you were talking
Yes.
about?
Yes.
How has it impacted them to be able to support their clients, patients?
Mhm. Yes, that reminds me, I did a similar presentation at a pelvic floor physical therapy office a few months ago. Just some general, like, provider education,
Mm,
but in that setting, and then also with, midwives and doulas, with whom I've worked, and then people that have attended the, community education events. It's almost like a collective, I would say, sigh of relief, but collective expression that we're so glad that we've said these things out loud and that we've heard what we've heard other people share,
mm,
because it helps to know that we're not alone. Moms, who are struggling, they're not alone. Family members who don't really feel prepared to help, they're not alone. Other family members feel that same way. Providers who, like pelvic floor physical therapists, for example, that see um, moms after that 6 week appointment, they have been able to put words to, you know, talking about differences in baby blues and postpartum
mm,
depression and
mm-hmm.
presentations of postpartum anxiety. And if you continue to feel this way, here's some resources and support options um, for you. So I've just seen a collective amount of really, I would say, positive feedback, and I don't mean that in a toxic positivity way, but just like I'm so glad we were having these conversations. Like, it helps me feel like I have a direction. It helps me feel like I'm not alone.
Mm,
And then I think from a bigger picture, from our side, is that we know it's really helping reduce stigma, and
right.
everything that we do to reduce stigma, then it just means more moms are going to be more likely to reach out for help if they're struggling.
Yeah, that is
Hmm.
so true.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's so we had this conversation with um, someone else who is recently on the podcast about how much support the support providers need,
Yes. Hmm. Yes.
and they might have experienced their own loss,
Yes.
and
Yes.
uh, you know
Hmm.
things get really complex.
They do get complex.
um, when the providers themselves are dealing with their own stuff
Hmm.
too. So
Yes.
when you empower those folks, they
Yes.
can
Yes.
empower the people they're supporting,
Yes.
and then
Hmm.
the world is a better place.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's really what education is. I mean, at least the way I structure it is I really hope people do feel empowered.
Mm,
I just empowered, just being sure we're creating that space for reducing stigma. That's what comes to mind. But
yeah,
empowerment, hope, again, I think hope can be just a really important part of the conversation when we're talking about not only, you know, birth givers, but providers who help them in various capacities. If we feel hopeful about the work that we're doing and the education and support that we're able to provide,
mhm.
um, I think that's a formidable force in a good way.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yes.
it really is.
Yes.
Well, that is a beautiful message, and to anybody
Hmm.
who's listening, certainly if you're a provider, get the support so you can feel empowered, and
Yes.
if you are somebody who is dealing with this mothering without a mother, that there are places for you to go
Hmm.
to and to get the support that you need. Yeah, I thank you so much for bringing this
Yes.
topic to the podcast and being able to support people with it.
Yes, absolutely. I'm so glad that this platform exists, just to share and talk about so many things that are important in the journey. I don't think we ever have it all figured out,
No.
but it's definitely good to to have resources like this one. And I really appreciate the space to share about how mother loss can impact our own parenting journeys.
Absolutely. Thank you. I
Hmm.
know it will help so many people.
Yes, I hope so. Thank you.
Please connect with Olivia at oliviawaddellcounseling.com, on Instagram, Olivia Waddell Counseling, and also on LinkedIn. If you are somebody who's experienced mothering without a mother, whatever the relationship status, I hope that this was supportive to you and that you feel seen and heard, at least for some parts of your experience. And if you know anybody who has experienced this, please send them this episode. It is so important for people to have just knowledge and information and support and to feel seen and heard, especially during times where they might feel their loneliest. And for anyone here who's a new listener, please do go subscribe to the podcast so you can get all of these episodes downloaded directly to you. The more subscribers this podcast has, the better it is for the podcast, and more people will be able to find it. And that is my whole goal, for everybody who needs this support to be able to find it. So, whatever way you can support, by subscribing, by sharing on Instagram or social media, or sending it to somebody that you care about, all of those avenues are greatly appreciated. I thank you so much for being here. Until next time.